It is one of the most horrific events of the Holocaust, a moment also of incredible heroism, an attempt to fight back in a desperate show of resistance. 80 years ago, the Warsaw Ghetto uprising. Since 1941, the Jewish population of the Polish capital and surrounding villages locked up by the Nazi occupiers in a district in the centre of the city, surrounded by a wall topped with barbed wire. 400,000 people living, surviving in inhuman conditions, much hunger, thirst and disease. In 1942, the roundups began, thousands deported to the Treblinka extermination camp. Just a year later, only 60,000 people were left still alive in the ghetto. One of them, Marek Edelman. He remembers what it was like in this clip recorded in 1993.
Here's part of the wall that surrounded the ghetto and could have been 10 kilometres long. It's the last bit that's still around. Here you can see the little openings where kids used to go through to the other side to try and get some potatoes or food for their parents. It was two completely different worlds. Here, the world of hunger and death sentences. On the other side, not easy, but there was life.
Marek Edelman was 24 years old in 1943. He became one of the leaders of the Warsaw Ghetto uprising. On April the 19th, the eve of Passover, German troops entered the camp to try to deport the last survivors. Against all odds, though, they encountered fierce resistance, the fighting lasting 28 days. On May the 16th, 1943, though, the uprising was finally crushed. The ghetto burnt and razed to the ground, as if to totally wipe out any sign of the Jewish population. There were few survivors, few miracles, but those still alive carry the memory of the ghetto to this day. We'll meet one shortly who lives in Paris. But 80 years on, what remains in Warsaw of what happened in a country governed by the populist conservative right wing? Nariman Laoudi and Renaud Lefort revisit the Warsaw Ghetto uprising for France 24.
The 80th anniversary of the Warsaw Ghetto uprising is very important to me, as it's important to the whole world.
When a German officer came, or a soldier, or an SS came, you didn't know who he was. So he's a faceless person. But when your next door neighbor, who wasn't willing to help you, you remember that more. It's absolutely human.
This question of how we remember it when you've actually lived through it is very difficult. And telling the next generation about it isn't easy either.
What happened was horrifying. It is unimaginable. My name is Larissa Kahn. I live in France, but I was born in Poland. And this is where I endured life during the whole of the Second World War. I was enclosed in the Warsaw Ghetto, and I was lucky, as I managed to escape. Life in the ghetto was straightforward. You spent your whole life looking for food. There was a lot of violence. The Germans sometimes came in and started shooting. People were dying of hunger in the ghetto. The dead were placed on the pavement, naked, because clothes were important, and they were covered in newspaper. I was 10 years old. In June 1942, when Treblinka was ready, the German Nazis organized a massive roundup. Over 300,000 people were deported to Treblinka. Treblinka meant immediate death. They said that people who worked for them wouldn't be deported. They even handed out certificates. And my mother was supposed to work on the night shift. I begged her not to go. She left. And she never came back. It's awful for a child to see their mother leave and never come back. My family organized my escape. They paid off police officers who were guarding the wall. We put a huge ladder against the 3-meter-high wall, and I jumped into the snow. I didn't break any bones. My Uncle Alexandre's friend was there. He took me to his home, and I ate until I was full that night. I can even remember what I ate. We talk a lot about Polish anti-Semitism. And I have to say it was very virulent. It's true they denounced a lot of people. But when it comes to those that looked after me, I was welcomed. I was protected by these people who they themselves were not protected. They risked death for me because they looked after me.
People often say to me, move on, but I can't. There's no fresh start for me. I like these photos because you can see the 3 generations. My mother is in the middle here. She was in the ghetto. She's surrounded by family. All my father and mother's family were exterminated. My mother told me that if a Jew escaped into the streets of Warsaw, a Polish person would denounce them immediately. There was really no way out. That's what stayed with me, unfortunately. But the Polish suffered greatly themselves during the war. There was a lot of destruction. Millions died as well. They have real difficulty accepting that they were both victims and guilty. My mother sort of forbade me, in a way, from going to Warsaw. There's no one there for me to see, no family to visit, no cemetery for me to go to in Warsaw.
September 1st, 1939, World War II begins. At that point, there are 3.5 million Jews living in Poland. 5 years later, 90% of the 3.5 million no longer alive, having been murdered by Germans and accomplices. That statement is horrific. Most people don't think, well, how many survived? 10% survived. But where are they today? Most of the Jews left. The trauma of the Holocaust, compounded by the repression of communism, created 2 options. Leave Poland, leave Judaism. And there were some that stayed Jewish in Poland, but they were a very, very small group, really a handful, a few thousand. Well, I would estimate that there were some tens of thousands that stayed in Poland and gave up their Jewish identity. So how many Jews are there today in Poland? We don't know. – 99% of the physical Warsaw Ghetto was destroyed. A handful survives. What is enough memory? Is there enough commemoration of the Warsaw Ghetto? What is enough? How can it be enough?
Definitely more Polish people should see it as important and should take part in events such as this one. Around my friends, people are aware, but I also think it very much depends on like what kind of person you are.
Now, with this government that we have, somehow it's a silent acceptance of growing hate. So that's why I'm doing it, to stop hate.
When I see a passage from my father's writings, when I see his photo among these 12 people, there were quite a few others. 12 people from among 400, 500,000 in the ghetto at the start, and 50,000 at the end. Those who were able to leave behind a written trace, who wanted to testify, leave a mark. It's a sort of link with my father, who fell very silent after the war. I remember an example I found in my father's memoirs. When a Jewish person managed to escape, scaled the wall, or got out of the ghetto in another way, some helped them. But there were also stinkers, or jerks who would take the Jewish man into a corner and say, "Drop your pants." And if he was circumcised, they took absolute joy in escorting them to the Gestapo for a reward. There was also despicable trafficking. There were heroes, there were dreadful people. And I think my parents wondered how they should process all that.
JCC Warsaw, Jewish Community Center in Warsaw, is a center which was established 10 years ago. It was really very, very special need because Jewish community was in the previous times in Poland for many, many years was in a kind of hideout, so we couldn't see each other, and we feel that this place is for us, and this is about us. So we are this very, very diverse Warsaw Jewish community. Not very big, but very active. It's very important for me today that I'm here with the group of people who is commemorating this anniversary of Warsaw Ghetto uprising in this independent way, different than in this official commemoration, because I really feel that it is not the place for the official commemoration made by authorities who are actually using the same mechanism against people, the mechanism of discrimination. And here, this is just about memory of people who was dying here and was fighting here, and people who like to remember about the whole situation.
There is a risk with ceremonies of legitimizing those in power. The more authoritarian the leaders are, the more likely they are to be anti-Semitic, and the more extravagant and spectacular the Warsaw Ghetto uprising commemorations are, like they were this year. In 2018, the Polish parliament adopted a law penalising public debate about Polish responsibility in the Shoah. It was adopted unanimously. Following international outrage, it was unanimously revoked. But it still paid off by scaring researchers, so public debate on the question no longer exists in Poland in the end. Today we have a revisionist, openly anti-Semitic government who is rewriting the history of the Shoah, even more so than it has been rewritten before. But this also reinforces the government's popularity, and it bases itself on structural anti-Semitism, which doesn't mean that the entire Polish population is anti-Semitic, but that the majority takes an active part in this vision of things. For me, what is left from the ghetto is the wall, but not a physical wall, not a brick wall, but an unsurmountable wall of hostility and hatred.
Renaud Lefort and Larimian Laudi revisiting the Warsaw Ghetto uprising for France 24. That's all from this week's edition. Don't forget, of course, you can catch it on our website at france24.com. More news coming up very shortly. Thanks for watching.